Facilitating and leading teams, communicating with others. This is Chapter 2, Lesson 1, How to Send and Receive Messages Effectively. Communications. A book could be written on the subject. In fact, many have been. Communications can be compared to the arts in the sense that one can either scribble, paint a Mona Lisa, or do something in between when it comes to effectively communicating with others. We'd all like to think that we're artists like Rembrandt or Michelangelo when it comes to communicating, but in reality, our attempts at it are often more similar to drawing stick figures. In its simplest form, the act of communications involves a message being transmitted, or more realistically transformed, between a sender and a receiver. Many people recognize the words of a spoken message, but few spend much time thinking about the factors that influence how that message is spoken, what the sender intended it to mean, or how the receiver will interpret it. The phrase "a two-way street" has been applied to communications. In this analogy, the street connects two beings, and messages are being sent up and down the street. There's no definite sender or receiver of the many messages. Both parties fill both roles as a variety of verbal and nonverbal information is exchanged. Unfortunately, many perceive communications as being a one-way avenue connecting the person that speaks to the receiver that listens. Team effectiveness cannot be attained without the use of effective communication skills. Each team member needs to know how to communicate well with each of the other team members. Unfortunately, not all people prefer to communicate in the same manner. Perceptions differ between team members. Some prefer verbal communication, while others prefer visual or kinesthetic, which is hands-on, communication. Effective facilitators are able to help bridge the gaps that exist between differing perceptions and communication styles. They're able to bring out the best in teams by helping each team member communicate more effectively with their peers. How we communicate. Believe it or not, each of us has preferred ways of sending, receiving, and interpreting information. When a message matches our preferences, we're more apt to listen to it, understand it, and believe it. When it doesn't match our preferences, we miss most of it, and we don't believe much of the rest of it. However, you can learn what your communication preferences are, and you can improve your ability to adapt your messages to fit the preferences of others. 3 different modalities exist for sending and receiving information, and 2 general forms of information processing exist. Messages are sent and received in basically 3 ways: visually, which is by sight, auditorily, by sound, and kinesthetically, which is by touch, feelings, and/or emotions. People in general prefer to receive messages visually, about 61% of the population, and today's media are conditioning us to prefer this approach even more. 25% of the people prefer auditory messages, and only 14% on average prefer the kinesthetic medium. This does not mean, however, that all messages should be sent visually, or that we should minimize the number that we send kinesthetically. From a message expression or sending perspective, people again prefer to use the visual medium. So when we express our messages to others, 53% prefer visual, 40% prefer auditory, and only 7% prefer kinesthetic. So these messages preferences follow in ranking as they did with message receiving, but with different weights being applied. It is interesting to note that television and school-based education seem to target the top 2 groups. Information processing can be classified as either serial or parallel. Serial processors, we often call these folks left-brain thinkers, are 36% of the population, and they like to process information in a step-by-step manner. The majority of the population prefers parallel processing, where several things are being sorted out all at once, but in lesser detail. The map is not the territory. Have you ever taken what appeared to be a good-looking shortcut on a map, only to find that the shortcut actually cost you more time and caused you more stress than you expected? Conversely, have you ever taken a wrong turn onto a road that you'd earlier ruled out as inefficient during your trip planning, only to discover a pleasant scenic route that you wanted to make sure you drove or walked again someday? Most likely you have. Most likely you've experienced the power of the map is not the territory quote without even realizing it. Embracing this quote and the insights it's intended to provoke can do a lot in helping to understand why our travel choices were not as effective as we wanted them to be. Having some data to serve as a map of a process's performance is better than simply relying on opinion alone. But it's also possible that a relatively better data analysis might help us make more effective decisions. So, no map, no data. Map by itself, some data. Map plus additional information, even better for making decisions. So imagine we're selecting personnel for a team based on our first impressions, or worse yet, on simply the references of others. That's an example of a choice that's based on less than adequate maps. Similarly, when we overreact to someone's email reply or assume that the words we hear over a conference call are accurate reflections of what that person was trying to actually say, we could be making a mistake because we're counting on the communication transfer, and for all we know, visual people are transferring to auditory who are transferring to kinesthetic. Who knows? How often do we assume that the map accurately reflects the territory? How many times have you caught yourself making decisions using only assumptions that may not be that accurate or complete? What choices have you made without even recognizing that they were based on incomplete information? The solution to these everyday challenges does not necessarily require us to spend a lot of extra time doing intense research. However, we should at least ask better questions in those situations where our existing set of facts might seem a bit sketchy. We should strive to become more self-aware. That's more important. Raise our levels of cognitive awareness. And we should at least recognize that we're working with maps that don't show every turn in the road. They don't show the combined impact that rain, poor lighting, and worn-out wipers might have on our performance.